Well, hello everyone, welcome back. Now this video is going to be very technical, and so it's going to be on my tech channel instead of my EV Outdoors channel. But it is related to the Silverado EV and Sierra EV as well as other GM EVs. And this is going to show you how to clone the open source app that allows you to get Apple CarPlay on your General Motors EV, where General Motors has removed that functionality. As always, folks, if you find our content useful, remember to hit that like button. It helps others find our content just a little bit easier on YouTube. Click on subscribe and hit the bell so you get notified anytime we add new content. Without further ado, let's get into all the technical details about how to get this open source app working on your General Motors electric vehicle.
Okay, everyone, welcome to the studio. So this is going to be kind of a unique video. I don't normally do these types of very technical videos, but a lot of you have requested that I show you how to compile this app for the Apple CarPlay on the Silverado and Sierra EV. Now, the developer did share with me that he's actually going to be publishing the app for testing to a larger group of folks. So I'll put the developer's contact information down in the video description as well as pin a comment. That may be the easier route for you if you're not one of those folks who's very technically inclined. The first thing we're going to need to do is install the Android Studio. Now, a lot of what we're going to do is going to be done from within the Android Studio, and most of what I'm showing you in this video today is basically setting up a development environment to build the app. The actual building of the app and exporting it is a very small portion of the video. So if you already have an Android development environment set up, you may be able to skip over some of these steps. You may have to deal with some error messages, do some research if you get an error and that kind of thing. This can be a very time-consuming process. So I'm just going to start out with that. But the first thing we're going to do is install the Android Studio. Now, I'm not going to show you how to download Android Studio. I've already gone ahead and downloaded that to my desktop here. So I'm just going to double click and launch the installer. Now, you will want to make sure that you're logged in as an administrator account. If you have an account on the system, which really is good security practice, that's a standard user account. I did run into some problems with my development when I was running under that account. This is actually in a virtual machine, and that's how I recommend you do this. But in order to minimize any issues, I strongly recommend that you're logged in as an administrator account to install all the software into your development. So we're going to go through the Android Studio setup. We are not going to install the Android virtual device. We really don't need that. If you plan to do other development on the system, you can certainly install that, but we don't need to do that. And what we're going to do here is let the installer complete, and then we'll move on to the next step. And as you can see, the installation is complete, and we're going to go ahead and start the Android Studio. And one of the things we can do as well is delete the installation files. And this is up to you. When you launch Android Studio for the first time, it's going to ask you if you want to allow Google to collect data. I don't really want Google to collect any data, so I'm going to say no to that. We're going to be presented with the welcome screen. We're going to say next. The type of setup that we want, we're going to say custom. And when we go in here, we're going to uncheck the Android virtual device and the Android emulator hypervisor driver. We don't need those. By default, it's going to install the Android SDK platform, and Android 16. It's also going to show us the location of our SDK. Go ahead and make note of that for the later steps in our guide here. We're going to say next. Also, right now, it's important to note, I highly recommend that you do all this on one drive. you can run into issues if you have the project stored on a different drive than where the Android Studio is installed. So I do recommend, if at all possible, that you install both on the same drive. And really, a virtual machine is probably the best choice for doing this. We're going to say next, and it's going to ask us to accept all the license agreements, which we don't really have too much of a choice. We have to accept those and say next. And at this point, it's going to go ahead and download files and finish installing the Android Studio and setting everything up. Okay, so the download and setup is complete. We're going to go ahead and say finish. And when we get to the Welcome to Android Studio screen, we're going to be presented with a couple of different options. We're actually going to clone a repository. So we're going to select this option. And when we go into the clone repository screen, we're going to be prompted with this message that Git is not installed. So we are going to select download and install, because we will need Git for Windows in order to proceed with this process. The nice thing about this is it can all be done right from within Android Studio. And once Git has been installed, we'll see that message down here. This means we can go forward with our process. The first thing I'm going to do is select the directory where I want to clone the project. And here you can see the default location, but I want to choose a location on my C drive. And so I'm going to go there and I'm going to create a folder called AAOS. And I'm going to select that folder. The next thing I'm going to do is paste in the URL to the repository that I want to clone into that folder. Now, I pasted this link also in the video description, and I'll pin a comment for it as well. This is the open source app that's provided by a couple of members of the community, R Worksman and Tachi91. So thank them again for their work on this project to bring CarPlay to General Motors electric vehicles. Specifically, the ones we're talking about are the Silverado EV and Sierra EV, but it should also work on other General Motors Global B based systems. So once we have everything there, we're going to go ahead and click the button that says clone. And it's going to clone the repository. And I'm just going to say trust all projects in the folder. And we're going to need to allow ADB. And I'm just going to maximize the window here. And we're going to get a message about Microsoft Defender. If you have that installed, you will want to exclude the folders to prevent any issues there. And we see a message down here in the lower right-hand corner that we have Gradle build scripts in these two folders. Now, the actual app that we're going to be working with is under example/Android. So make note of that. We're going to get back to that later on in this project. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to go into our settings. And we're going to go to our plugins. And under our plugins, we're going to go to the settings and we're going to say update plugins automatically. This will automatically update any plugins that we have installed. We're going to install Flutter. We will need Flutter and Dart for this project. We're going to go ahead and say restart IDE. We're going to wait for the Gradle sync to complete. Okay, this message can be ignored for the time being because this is not the actual project that we're working in. We still have quite a few things to do here to get the project or the development environment set up. we're going to go back to our settings and our plugins, and we're going to type in Dart. And Dart should be installed. Yes, it is. That gets installed when we install Flutter. So we're going to verify that. The next thing we're going to do, and all these links will be down in the video description, folks, as well. We're going to close out of this Android Studio project for now, and we're going to download VS Code. And we also need to install the Flutter SDK. So we install the plugin within Android Studio, and we also need to install the SDK. And one of the ways we're going to do that is by using VS Code. So as you can see, we're here on the code.visualstudio.com, and we're going to download Visual Studio Code or VS Code for Windows. And it should download fairly quickly. We're going to install this. Going to select the default options. We can create a desktop icon, and we're going to say install. While that's installing, we're going to type in Flutter SDK. And when we go to the Flutter SDK, we're going to install with VS Code. Okay. And this is going to tell us how to install via VS Code. So once we have the VS Code installed, we can launch it. And we're just going to say done here. We're going to minimize this. We're going to install the Dart and Flutter extensions by using the extension marketplace page. So we're going to right click this and open it in a new tab. And we're going to click install, continue, open Visual Studio Code. It's going to open in here, and we're going to say install, trust publisher, and install. This can take a few moments to actually install. Once it's installed, this will change, and you'll see disable, uninstall, and switch to pre-release. And we're going back to our guide here, and we can see that we still haven't actually installed the SDK. But what we're going to do is we're going to open the command palette, and we're going to type in Flutter, and we're going to select a new Flutter project. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to make it so that both of these windows can appear on our screen. And we're going to do a Control-Shift-P, and we're going to type in Flutter, and we're going to select new project. And when we do that, we're going to be given the option to download the SDK, which we want to do. And it's going to ask us to select a folder for the Flutter SDK. Again, I'm going to create a folder on the root of our C drive called Flutter. This is where we're going to install the SDK. Now, the next thing we're going to do after this SDK is installed is we're going to have to tell the system where the SDK files are located. And we do that by adding it to the system path under the environment variables, which I'll show you in a minute. Then we're also going to validate our setup with Flutter Doctor. Now, when we install using VS Code, the nice thing about that is it will actually run Flutter Doctor for us, or it should run Flutter Doctor for us as part of the installation process and allow us to address any issues identified and verify that before we proceed. And you can see this little pop-up down here, and it allows us to add it to the path right from here. We're going to go ahead and say add. and we can see the Flutter SDK was added to your path. Okay, it tells us about Google Analytics. And I'm going to go ahead and maximize this window again. And you can see that it ran Flutter Doctor for us. And it found 4 issues, or issues in 4 categories. So we're going to scroll up. We want to address any of these issues before we move on to trying to do anything with our application, because if there's something wrong with the Flutter SDK, we're not going to be able to move forward. So anything that doesn't have a checkbox is something we want to pay attention to. So we can see that it's telling us that it's not in our path, which we just added it. So when we run Flutter Doctor again, that should be resolved. You can see our Windows version. The next issue we have is the Android toolchain. Okay. And we can see that we need the command line tools for the SDK. We need to install that. And then there's also licenses that have not been accepted for the SDK. So the first thing I'm going to do is open the Windows PowerShell as an administrator. I'm going to say yes to this. And it tells us the exact command we need to run here, which is Flutter Doctor -- Android licenses. So I'm just going to copy that and paste that in here. Okay, SDK Manager is not installed. So we need to go to our Android Studio and install the command line tools for the SDK. So we're going to go to our settings, languages and frameworks, and then we're going to select the Android SDK. Now, if we look at the README from the developer, we can see a lot of information in here. And one of the things he says there is that this was actually developed on Android 15 API level 35. Now, I may not need to install this, but I chose to do this anyway to add it. And then I'm going to go into the SDK tools, and I want the SDK command line tools. And I also want to install the Google Play services as well. And we're going to say OK. This process may take a few moments. This is going to download all the things that we just selected and install them. And hopefully when you're done, you see the same thing that I do, that everything was successfully completed, and we can click Finish. Once we're finished here, we're going to go ahead and reclose out of Android Studio. And I'm going to go back to my PowerShell window here, and I'm going to try to rerun the licenses. Now, instead of getting an error, I'm getting a prompt to review licenses that have not been accepted. I'm going to say Y for yes. And I'm going to need to go through and accept all these licenses. If I don't accept them, I will not be able to proceed. Let's go back to our Flutter Doctor output here in VS Code. We can see that we have a big X next to Chrome. That's fine. We're not doing any web development. And we also have an X next to Visual Studio, which is also fine because we're not developing any Windows apps. So in reality, the only 2 issues we were dealing with is the command line tools for the SDK and the Android licenses. So now that we've completed that, I'm going to simply run Flutter Doctor, and we're going to see if those issues have been resolved. And they have. We can see green checkboxes next to the Android toolchain now. We still have Chrome and Visual Studio, but as I said, we don't need those for what we're doing here, so we can safely ignore the red X's there. Now that we have all that done, we can proceed on to the next step. Next, I'm going to reopen the Android Studio, and we're going to go back into the root of our project. And the last thing we're going to do in here is we're going to open up this project_config.gradle file. And we're going to want to go in here and change the application ID and the application name. We can also change the versioning information as well. And in here, I'm just going to put in EV Outdoors. And we can call it EV Outdoors OSS C Player. And for the version code, I'm just going to put 1. And this is going to be version 1.0 for me. And once I've made my changes, I'm going to go ahead and close out of this file. Once I close out of that file, I can now close the project. And once we close the project, we'll be taken back to the Android Studio welcome screen. Now we're back at the welcome screen here. We're going to leave this alone for a minute, and we're going to go into our Windows settings. And we're going to go into our system settings. And under our system settings, we're going to go into advanced. And under advanced, we're going to see developer mode. And we're going to turn the developer mode on. Now, before we go back into Android Studio, we're going to open our PowerShell again as an administrator. And we're going to cd into the directory where we cloned this project. And we're going to put in example and Android. And I'm just going to do a directory listing to make sure I'm where I want to be. And I am. And while I'm in here, I'm going to run the command flutter pub get. Now we're going to leave this open, and we're going to do one more thing. We're going to go back into our Windows settings. We're going to go to System, then About, and we're going to go into our Advanced System Settings, and we're going to click on Environment Variables. And under our environment variables, we're going to add the Java home to our path. So we're going to create a new variable. The variable name is going to be Java home. And the default path for the Java that is installed with Android Studio is going to be C program files Android/Android Studio/JBR. And we're going to say OK to that. Next thing we're going to do is open our path, a new entry, and the new entry is going to read our Java home, and it's going to go to the bin there. And we're going to say OK, OK, and OK a third time, and we can close out of the Windows settings. Now we want to verify our Java environment is all set up correctly before we move any further. But since we just made some changes, we probably should have done that before we opened the PowerShell, but that's fine. We're going to close the PowerShell, and we're just going to reopen it as an administrator again. That way it gets the changes to our environment variables. And we're going to run this command. Okay. And this tells us that we have our Java home directory correctly set in the path. And the next thing we're going to run is our Java version. And the output of this should also tell us the different versions we're running, indicating that our Java environment is set up correctly. So everything looks good here. You should see something very similar on your system. If you don't, you're going to want to go back and check over the steps that we just completed. Now in the README file, it says we're going to run a Gradle Clean. However, the commands are not in the example folder. So we need to go back to the regular Android folder, run the Gradle Clean before we proceed further. So we're going to go in CD to c:\AAOS\Android this time. And if we do an ls, we can see we have the Gradle W in there. And so what we're going to do is we're going to run this command here. And if the software development gods are on our side, we're going to see this green build successful message. And we're going to do a cd ... here. This is going to take us back to the root directory of our project. Now, you can generate a key from within Android Studio. This is just the way I like to do it. You're welcome to generate a key for signing however you'd like, but we will need to generate a key so that we can sign our package to be uploaded to the Google Play console. And this is the command we're going to run here. And you're going to want to make note of the alias. The alias is upload. And it's going to ask us to enter a password. I'm just going to put in password because I'm not going to use this. And it's going to ask us to enter a first and last name. It's going to say EV Outdoors. I'm not going to enter anything for organizational unit or organization. City is Mount Airy, Maryland, US. Okay, and then we just need to type in yes to confirm it. And we can see that my-upload-key.jks has been created, and it's been stored in the root of our project. Now that we've done all this, we're going to need to open the project that we've been working in, not the one that we were already in with Android Studio. So we're going to browse and we're going to go to Example and Android, and we're going to select this folder to open our project. And when we open the project, it's going to perform a Gradle sync. This can take some time, so just let it go through its process. We are going to be prompted to exclude folders again. I'm going to go ahead and say yes to that. And we're going to let this go through its process before we move on to the next steps. Okay, everyone. So now we can see that the Gradle sync has completed, and it's telling us that a project update is recommended. But all we're really going to be doing for this is basically building our own separate version of this app. So we don't want to upgrade any of the project files unless we absolutely have to. So I'm going to ignore this project upgrade message. And I'm going to go here and I'm going to go to build. And we're going to select to generate a signed app bundle or APK. And we're going to be uploading this, or you're going to be uploading this to the Google Play console. Now you will need a Google developer account. The last time I checked, they charge a $25 fee to set that up. So just be aware of that. I'm not going to cover that particular process in this video. I'm just going to cover the process of getting the AAB file, which is what you're going to need to upload to the Google Play console. So we're going to select this Android app bundle. And we have an existing key store. Now, as I said earlier, you can create a new one here, but we created one earlier. So we're going to navigate to the root of our project where we stored our key. There's our upload key, the JKS files. We're going to select that. And we're going to type in the key store password, which is a really difficult one. And the key alias, as I said, is upload. And the key password is password. Now, I do recommend that you select something unique for that. And we're going to say remember passwords, and we're going to click next. And this is going to tell us the destination folder where the bundle is going to be stored once this is complete. It's going to be stored under example, Android, and app. We're going to select release for the build variant, and we're going to click on create. Now, this is the part of the process where you can run into errors. There may be some troubleshooting that's required, both because of your unique development environment that you set up and because of changes in both the SDKs and in the open source app that are definitely going to occur after the publication of this video. So let's go ahead and click on create. If you're doing this in a VM, I do recommend that you take a snapshot before you click on create. That way, if something happens, you can go back. And at this point, the Gradle build is going to run, and we're going to cross our fingers and hope that we did everything correctly. Okay, so as I said, this is where we can run into errors. And I did run into an error with building the file. And we can see that in the CarLink plugin.kt file, there is an unresolved reference to Display Manager. And you can explain this with AI if you have Google Gemini set up. But basically, there's a couple values here that I need to change. So it actually highlighted the line that was an issue. So I'm actually going to go through. I made note of the code that I need to change. I'm going to go through and replace this line. And I'm going to replace the line below it. We're going to add that in here. And we're going to close this out. And we're going to go back into our build. And we're going to try to create the app bundle one more time. And we can see that the build was successful. And so we're going to go into our directory now, and we're going to find our AAB file. Example, Android app. And we're going to double click release. And this is our Android app bundle. The last thing I'll show you here is we're just going to go into Google and say Google Play Console. And this is where you're going to go, and you're going to sign up with your Google account. Again, like I said, you will need to pay a $25 fee, at least that's what it was the last time I checked, to sign up for a developer account. You'll follow the instructions in there. You'll publish the app to internal testing. That will allow you to then push the app from the Google Play Store into your vehicle. And then you'll be able to use this solution. Alternatively, folks, I know this is very involved, but alternatively, the developer is going to be opening up the testing to more testers. So if you really don't want to go through all this and you're not that technically inclined, definitely reach out to the developers and see if they can get you into the testing program. And eventually, like I said, hopefully this app is going to be officially published on the Google Play Store, and you'll be able to download it without going through all this. Or maybe GM will bring back Apple CarPlay, but I'm not holding my breath. Folks, I hope you found this information useful. Remember to hit that like button. It helps others find our content just a little bit easier on YouTube. Click on subscribe, and when you click on subscribe, hit the bell so you get notified anytime we add new content. Hug the people you love, and we will see you next time.